Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us your sources, and our mission, well, it's always the same. Dig into them, pull out the key insights so you get informed fast without, feeling buried in information.
And today's topic is definitely a deep one. We're looking at this huge shift described in your materials, the British National Health Service, the NHS, becoming, something totally different in 2032.
Right, Health and Fitness Instruction Services, or AFICE. And this came with the BritFit program. Quite the overhaul.
It really was. The sources lay out these core pieces. First, everyone gets a free BritFit tracker, think something like a standard fitness band.
Okay, wearable tech for everyone.
Yep. Then you start earning Brit points. You get these from joining free fitness classes, big open-air ones happening everywhere, or just logging your own workouts.
And these points, they're not just for bragging rights.
No, definitely not. You could use them to buy healthy meals at special AFICE food centers. And here's a key part. You could invest them.
Invest points?
Into Britcoin health savings accounts, HSAs, up to 3 of them. A Britcoin was set at, I think, 1 million Brit points. And the potential payout, your invested points could double, triple, even quadruple. Big incentive.
Okay, but why? What triggered such a radical change? It wasn't just an idea someone had, right? The sources point to a major crisis around 2031.
That's the crux of it. The old NHS was buckling under the strain. Zainab Masters, who became head coach for HAFIS in Birmingham, looking back from 2034, she really emphasizes the debt and, frankly, the unhealthy lifestyles that were crippling the system.
So it was a response to the sheer volume of preventable illness, the cost.
Exactly. The healthcare system was just overwhelmed. AFIS was this attempt to pivot, completely focus on prevention, on fitness, on diet, hoping to stop illnesses before they started and, cut those long-term costs.
And the initial reaction? Your sources suggest it wasn't all bad at first. People felt healthier, more energy.
Yeah, the early reports sound quite positive. Better health, more energy, even stronger communities forming around these fitness classes. It seemed to make fitness less daunting, more accessible for people who maybe weren't active before.
It sounds like HAFIS grew pretty quickly then. More classes, more places to use points.
It did. New class types popped up, more food vendors joined the network, and they launched the BritFit app. That made tracking your points and spending them much easier. It gave off this vibe of, building momentum.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics, the incentive structure. How did Brit points really push people towards healthier choices day to day?
Well, it was direct, tangible. Use your points at a HAFIS food center for a healthy meal. Good. Invest them in a Britcoin HSA with that potential for big returns. Even better. It literally made the healthy choice the financially smarter choice in many ways.
And the fitness side. These free classes everywhere. That must have been key to getting people involved.
Absolutely critical. The aim was to remove barriers. Free classes, convenient locations, making it social, maybe even fun. Less of a chore, more of a community thing. HAFIS wanted to be seen as a partner in your health, not just fixing you when you broke.
Technology was obviously embedded in all this, the app we mentioned, but also these smart walls. What were they?
Right. The app was your personal hub tracking, points, redemption, easy. The smart walls were different. Think massive public screens all over Britain by 2033. They broadcast official HAFIS announcements, rule changes.
So like public service announcements, but unavoidable. Zainab Masters used these.
Yeah. Her updates on BritFit rules would go out on the smart walls, made sure everyone got the information, like it or not.
And the tracker itself, you mentioned, it wasn't just steps, it measured effort. Why go that deep?
That was crucial. You didn't just get points for showing up. The tracker monitored how hard you were actually working, intensity, duration. It was about genuine participation, real effort, no gaming the system just by, standing around in a class.
Okay, now, things seem to take a darker, maybe more coercive turn with this next element. Food cred. This wasn't about earning points, was it? It changed how you paid for food entirely.
It absolutely did. Food cred was basically a credit system for groceries. But the bill you got each quarter wasn't based on the price tag in the shop.
No. What was it based on then?
The healthiness of the food, or rather, the unhealthiness. The nutritional content determined the cost.
So healthier food was cheaper on your food cred bill, and unhealthy stuff cost more.
Precisely. The system had a formula. Saturated fat, seed oils, sugar, starch grams, those added cost, protein and fiber. Grams of those reduced the cost.
Wow. Can you give an example? The sources mentioned some Birmingham dishes.
Right, like a Birmingham Keto Classic or a Brummy Bacon Bliss. Likely higher in fat, maybe starch would bring up a higher food cred cost. But a Brum Vegan Delight or Veggie Brummy Delight, probably higher fiber, lower bad fats, would cost less on your bill. Even a Cadbury bar would hit harder than, say, grilled fish.
Very direct manipulation of shopping habits through the wallet. And there's a story about Sophie, a single mother in Birmingham.
Yeah, her story illustrates it perfectly. She ends up with this massive food cred bill because her family's diet was deemed unhealthy. That debt became the motivator. She started going to the BritFit classes, not necessarily out of a sudden love for fitness, but to earn Brit points specifically to pay down that food cred debt.
The intended consequence, essentially, financial pressure driving behavioral change.
Exactly. That's how it was designed to work.
But surely not everyone just accepted this. Your sources mention protests, resistance.
Definitely not. Food cred especially sparked backlash. People the authorities called anarchists started protesting the bills, even disrupting BritFit classes.
Yeah.
And that resistance led to, well, much stricter enforcement.
Which brings us to the Tower of London, the sweaty labor fitness camp. Zainab Masters argued this wasn't just for being overweight or in debt, right? It was about attitude, defiance.
That was the official line. It was for people with huge food cred debts and a pattern of non-compliance, actively resisting or disrupting. It wasn't supposed to be a fat camp, but an attitude adjustment camp.
And what did this camp involve? It sounds pretty grim.
It was described as a no less than 31-day program, mandatory. Think intense physical labor, military-style schedules, strictly monitored meals, probably healthy but basic, and even psychological conditioning. Lectures, journaling, focused on responsibility.
Intense. And Her Majesty supported this publicly.
Very much so. Her speeches framed it as a matter of duty. She drew parallels to things like wartime conscription, even serfdom, suggesting this wasn't cruelty, but restoring responsibility after years of people expecting handouts. The phrase sweat equity came up, earning your way back through hard physical work.
And the rules for everyone else got tighter too. Zainab's 2033 updates broadcast on those smart walls.
Yeah, they really clamped down. A mandatory daily minimum of 300 Brit points. Miss it. You're auto-enrolled in a class. Points reset daily, no saving them up. Fitness curfews enforced by a location, tracking out late without hitting your points. Auto-enrolled in a late-night session.
Wow. And consequences for high debt and non-compliance.
Suspension of digital services. So no access to your Brit points, your food cred account, maybe more. But there were carrots, too, exceed your goals. And you could get debt forgiven, SmartCoin bonuses, even priority for housing, or, ironically, standard NHS treatment if needed.
It sounds like public shaming became a tool as well.
Yes. Big public scoreboards showing food cred debt. Top repayers got praised, but bottom debtors were listed, sometimes with quotes about their bad habits. And the BritFit app itself got a snitch board.
A snitch board? Seriously?
Yeah. Report somebody you think is slacking off not earning their points. If you were right, you got rewarded with Brit points. Peer pressure and surveillance, basically, built right into the system.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. There's a really strange demographic element mentioned in the sources. The manishing. What on earth is that?
It refers to this reported sharp drop in the number of men in cities after something called the 2031 robo-state takeover, which isn't fully detailed, but sounds like another major event.
And how does that connect to Hafez?
Well, the sources suggest many men had sort of opted out of the mainstream system that Hafez was built on. They were supposedly more into things like mining crypto, using automated AI healthcare, and generally didn't engage in the kind of overconsumption that led to high food cred debt.
So they just weren't racking up the dead in the same way?
Apparently not. The sources also mention things like Gamergate, MGTOW movements, as perhaps contributing to men separating from these societal structures beforehand. There's even a theory floated about different gender responses to stress. Women may be over-consuming, men under-consuming, leading to more women falling into food cred debt.
Which means HIS enforcement, the tower camps, the pressure. It disproportionately fell on the women who remained in the cities.
That seems to be the implication in the materials, yes. A significant gender skew in who the system impacted most severely.
Right. Let's look at Brianna McKee's story. An American student who gets caught up in this. Tell us about her.
Brianna McKee, nursing student, fitness trainer from Ohio State University. Your sources say she initially viewed the British NHS very critically, thought it was coddling people.
How did she end up in the tower then?
She got involved with some of those anti-food cred protests while in Britain, ran up her own food cred debt, didn't comply with the BritFit rules, and boom, involuntary admission to the tower camp.
And we get a sense of the tower from another inmate, Katie Wyatt. What was her take?
Katie's perspective, as presented, is bleak. Relentless, exhausting workouts. Zero personal freedom, constant watching. It wasn't just about fitness. It was about breaking you down, total control.
And during Brianna's time, they brought in mandatory head shaving because of her pink hair.
That's the story. Her pink hair was seen as defiant, a symbol of individuality they wanted to crush. Her Majesty apparently gave a speech justifying it, linking it to military discipline, getting rid of personal vanity for the collective good.
Grim. But oddly, Brianna's first meal there, she liked it.
Yeah, surprisingly. The orientation cafeteria served things like grilled mackerel. Portion control, no junk, but she found it. Good. Healthy, palatable. Maybe a glimpse of the nutritional correction aspect, even amidst the punishment.
The dorms, though, less appealing.
Oh, definitely not. Huge room, stacked bunks, zero privacy, enforced silence. Described as really intense, unsettling. And being American, she immediately stood out.
But she connects with someone, Mags McRae.
Right. A whispered conversation with Mags from Glasgow. Different backgrounds, but thrown together in this extreme situation, they formed this initial bond. A bit of humanity in a dehumanizing place.
And the overall effect on Brianna. Did the tower break her?
Seems like the opposite, strangely enough. The sources say she became more focused, galvanized. She saw it as this transformative ordeal that actually reinforced her dislike for soft systems. It hardened her resolve.
Leading to her appearance on Zainab Master's podcast later.
Exactly. After getting out, she goes on Ask Her Majesty in 2034. And what does she say? She wants to start a program back at Ohio State called Sweaty, modeled directly on BritFit and Hafiz, to help students sweat away student debt.
Wow. So she embraced the core philosophy and Her Majesty's speech when Brianna first arrived at the tower.
Yeah, that speech really set the stage. Her Majesty talked about 80 years of coddling by the NHS, contrasting it with the discipline of Victorian workhouses and military service, making it clear this was about tough love, discipline, ending entitlement.
Which loops back to the Victorian workhouses. Zainab actually suggested bringing them back as workout houses.
She did. The idea was, for the most severely indebted and non-compliant people, maybe the tower wasn't enough or was temporary. These workout houses would be repurposed old workhouse buildings running permanent sweaty labor fitness camp programs.
So a long-term solution for the worst offenders.
That was the concept. A place to work off debt through physical labor, forced fitness, regulated diet, and attitude adjustment indefinitely if necessary. Brit points were seen as proof of compliance, and if you just wouldn't or couldn't comply, couldn't manage your Brit point balance. The workout house was the end of the line.
It's such a complex, layered system. Can you just quickly recap the main interfaces people dealt with?
Sure. For the individual, it's the BritFit app. Your dashboard for points, exercise logs, food cred score, repayment plans, finding classes, and that social snitch board. Then publicly, you had the food cred debtor scoreboards, celebrating top repairs, shaming bottom debtors, listing people wanted for noncompliance, and showing local class times. Constant visibility.
Okay, so summing up this deep dive, a massive shift from NHS to Hafiz, driven by a health crisis. BritFit uses points, trackers, rewards. Food Cred uses cost to force dietary change. And for resistance, you have severe measures like the tower camp and potentially these workout houses.
That's the picture painted by the sources, yes. A system using incentives, technology, social pressure, and ultimately pretty harsh enforcement, all aimed at creating a healthier, perhaps more compliant population.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? This tension between looking after public health and individual freedom. Where do you draw the line? Is this kind of radical intervention justified by a crisis, or is it a dangerous overstep?
And what are the long-term effects on society when health is managed through debt, public shaming, mandatory exercise? Does it create genuine well-being or just compliance through fear?
These are the big questions the sources raise. Definitely something for you, our listener, to mull over. Consider the ethics, the history, the potential future if systems like this were ever actually implemented.
Indeed. It's a stark vision. We hope this exploration has given you a thorough understanding of the scenario presented in your materials.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
You know, trying to stay fit and healthy while you're juggling student life, the debt, it's a lot.
It really is. But what if, tackling your fitness could actually help with the student debt part directly?
That's kind of a wild idea.
Yeah.
But it's exactly what we're looking at today, right? This program at Ohio State University.
Yeah, it's called Sweaty. And it's this really fascinating mix of physical ed and student debt relief.
And we've got some great source material, thanks to you listeners, to really unpack how this thing works.
Exactly. We're going to do a deep dive into it. It's not your typical gym class requirement, that's for sure.
Right. So the core is linking physical effort, like actual workouts, to lowering student loan payments.
That's the hook. You earn these digital currency points through the PE program, and those points translate into debt reduction.
Okay, so we need to get into that, and also this mission-based learning idea and the fitness test they hit you with right away.
Yeah, that assessment sounds like quite the welcome gift. But let's start with the basic concept first.
Okay, so the debt repayment source. It lays it out pretty clearly. Complete the program, earn points, pay down debt.
Yep. It's a dual benefit, isn't it? Get fit, reduce your loans. It's a powerful incentive. How those points actually convert, oh, that's an interesting detail. Maybe a ratio.
Could be. Definitely more tangible than just, feeling healthier.
And the places they do this, not lecture halls, right?
No, active learning spaces, apparently.
Yeah.
Open areas, exercise gear, interactive stuff. Sounds very different.
And this mission-based learning, it's structured like quests, like in a game.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, to get students, engaged and moving, not just going through the motions.
Makes sense. Gives it purpose, maybe makes it less of a chore, potentially even fun.
And it's collaborative, too, apparently. So teamwork skills on top of fitness.
Plus, they try to personalize it, cater to different levels and interests.
Which is smart. Increases the chances people stick with it.
Okay, but first, you have to get through that initial assessment. Mandatory for all freshmen.
And it sounds brutal. 2 hours, continuous exercise.
91-second intervals. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, lunges. The works.
They even warn students it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's not just a baseline check. It actually affects your starting points balance, maybe even which classes you get assigned to.
So, huge first impression.
And this is where we meet Coach Brianna McKee.
Ah, yes, the coach. The ChatGPT source mentioned her.
Right. Apparently, she was already fired up to challenge her first class after some debate or disagreement.
Okay.
And then, get this, the person she debated, this John Bender clone character, actually ends up in her boot camp class.
Oh, wow. You can imagine the dynamic there. That probably didn't exactly mellow her out.
The sources suggest it definitely fueled her intensity, yeah. And she seems very organized.
Yeah.
Constant monitoring, apps, sharing data between coaches.
A very connected system. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
And there's a reason for the coaching structure itself, something about a treaty.
Yeah, the Robo-State Peace Treaty of 2032. Apparently, it made it problematic for male coaches to mandate activity for male students as part of this debt thing.
So the solution was female coaches.
Mostly, yeah. With exceptions for their own training, the sources say, all sweaty coaches have to be female.
Interesting. And Brianna's background, she trains with OSU athletes.
Including the football team, yeah. So she's bringing some serious athletic experience to this. Probably explains the intensity level.
Definitely adds credibility. Now, back to that Bender clone. Walking into her class must have been something.
He apparently described it as surprising, a bit awkward at first.
But he developed a grudging respect for the workouts.
Yeah, despite the awkwardness. It even became this, running joke in the class, apparently. Students bring up debate points during tough drills.
That's a weird layer to boot camp, doesn't it?
Definitely keeps things spicy.
Yeah.
Okay, so physically, where are these large group workouts happening?
On the Ohio State Oval, that big central lawn, makes sense for large groups.
And other unis do similar things. Bascom Hill at Wisconsin, Old Main at Penn State.
Right, using those big central open campus spaces, it seems like a common practice.
And Penn State had something similar before.
Yeah.
EZAC.
Yeah, exercise and sport activity for community training. Sweaty seems like a maybe more evolved version with the direct financial tie-in.
Okay, so back to Brianna's philosophy. She believes students have no choice.
Pretty much. If you're not already an athlete, you're drafted onto the sweaty team. High expectations.
And she's quite direct about it, believes it's effective.
Extremely effective, she says. And she mentions having full control over their bodies in this context. It really drives home how non-negotiable it is for her.
Wow. That intensity definitely carries over into her specific class, the Sweaty Buckeye Boot Camp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Picture this. Scarlet and gray camo uniforms. Sweaty Buckeye Boot Camp on the back.
Military theme. She plays the drill instructor.
Exactly. Military music, the whole DI persona. And it starts immediately. No intros.
Just straight into the exercises.
Yeah. An AI voice announces the next drill, like, next you owe jumping jacks.
And the students.
They have to shout back, jumping jacks, ma'am! Like a sound off. Then boom, right into it.
That's quite a mix. Serious workout, but kind of theatrical, too.
And apparently the failure rate for first-timers is high. She uses those sound-offs to gauge their attitude, keep them in line.
And she likes hearing them in.
So she finds satisfaction in hearing the whole class shout it with respect, gives you a real feel for the atmosphere she creates.
And why put yourself through all this? It comes back to the points, right?
She's witty points, yeah. Or smart crypto, as it's called. You redeem them for debt reduction, which is the main goal.
But also other things, like campus services.
Meal plans, textbooks, apparently. It creates this whole internal economy based on fitness.
And they use leaderboards and challenges to keep people competitive.
Keeps the motivation up, yeah. Adds that gamified element.
Speaking of gamification, let's talk about Fumiko Takeshima's program, Sweaty Farmville.
Now, this sounds really out there. It uses a huge electronic floor, like hexagonal tiles.
Okay.
And students do exercises on the floor, squats, lunges, push-ups, burpees to simulate farming tasks.
Seriously. Like squats to plant virtual carrots.
Something like that. And doing these tasks earns them sweaty points. It's incredibly inventive.
It sounds like a live-action video game. And students actually like it.
The feedback mentioned is positive, yeah. They find it engaging, and the financial incentive is obviously key. It beats just grinding reps in a standard gym for some, I guess.
You can see how that would be more motivating. Like Minecraft, maybe, where you do tasks to get resources.
That's a good analogy. Sweaty Farmville applies that game loop to exercise. You plant with one move, tend with another, harvest with something harder.
And different crops are worth different points based on the effort.
Exactly. Like maybe carrots are 50 points, but virtual watermelons needing more work are 90. Each stage of growth requires specific exercises.
Starfish jumps for corn, lunges for sprouts, jump squats for harvesting. It's creative, you have to admit. Makes exercise a game.
Definitely a novel approach. Now, shifting gears a bit, there's another program using tech, but for a very different purpose. Fatima Diop's AI Peacekeeping Initiative.
Right, this is aimed at predatory behavior.
Yeah.
Using AI decoys.
Yeah. The AI creates decoys that mimic potential targets or set up tempting situations.
And if someone interacts inappropriately.
It's logged anonymously. The AI then tries to build these like virtual social barriers around the person.
So it's preventative, not direct confrontation.
Exactly. Trying to head off harm before it happens by creating a kind of social consequence engine. Very proactive.
This brings us to that broader societal trend mentioned in the sources, the manishing.
Yeah, this reported decline in men going into fields like law enforcement, leading to an all-female Ohio government and police force by 2030.
Which, while maybe initially seen by some as progress, raised questions later. A Pyrrhic victory.
Fatima Diop herself apparently voices concern about this imbalance. She stresses needing men involved, the value of balanced leadership.
And points out potential unintended consequences, even practical workforce issues.
Right, needing to re-engage men, address their concerns.
The sources seem to trace some of this back to the dating app scene in the 2020s.
Apparently, yeah. Extreme selectivity by women led to a lot of men feeling unselected, basically. So they just left the platforms.
And shifted their focus to gaming crypto.
Gaming, crypto, 3D printing, even AI companions, the sources suggest.
It's described as this paradox. Women getting lots of attention but feeling dissatisfied, while many men just checked out. A precursor mentioned is the MGTOW movement.
And this led to men building their own sort of parallel tech society, while women felt empowered in automated cities.
An empowerment that might have been a bit illusory because the underlying tech infrastructure was maybe being built and maintained elsewhere.
And this automated urban world designed for the largely female population was missing something.
Male companionship, apparently. Men who remained were described as either like slackers or activists, few with actual resources.
It's a complex picture. And then there's Governor Rita McGovern, elected in 2030.
On a platform of controlling AI, yeah. But found it harder than expected.
Increasingly powerless, it seems, witnessing the state capitol spontaneously becoming a daycare. Symbolic, maybe. And the robo-state gaining influence.
Right. Okay, let's circle back to Brianna and the Sweaty program itself.
Yeah.
The fairness question. Mandating intense workouts for non-athletes.
Her justification is pretty straightforward. It's necessary. They need to meet a high standard. It's their duty. Now they're drafted, and it works.
And again, that comment about having total control over their bodies.
It really underscores her perspective. And don't even think about complaining about the uniform.
Right. She has specific reasons for that, too. Not just aesthetics.
Two main ones, apparently. One, functionally, it lets her see their form, track progress easily.
And the other.
To put them in their place. Discourage defiance. She actually wants them to feel self-conscious at first.
Believing it makes them more humble, more likely to follow orders.
That's the idea. It's a deliberate psychological element, not just about clothing.
And the program structure reinforces this control, the class repetition rule.
Yeah, if you're in a class, you stay with that coach until they decide you pass. No switching to avoid someone tough.
The coach has sole discretion.
Pretty much. They can fail you, change requirements, even monitor you outside class and assign extra work. Brianna's warnings about this are apparently quite stern.
And inside her boot camp, what are the absolute musts?
Pay attention, transition instantly between exercises, show respect, always. I am. No complaining. Focus on perfect form, push your limits. It's hardcore discipline, and the coaches can see everything. Real-time activity data.
Through the AI system, yeah. Hard to hide if you're slacking. Plus, the Sweat Drop system incentivizes activity for everyone, students and coaches.
Okay, but this level of control, it raises questions, doesn't it, about authority?
Absolutely. Can coaches just order any exercise anytime? Is it abuse of power? Is using exercise as punishment? Okay. What about targeting specific students, like attractive males?
Those are serious points. What's the counter-argument offered? Well, Brianna apparently notes that boys often start working out when coaches appear anyway. She sees mandated exercise as better than being sedentary, especially since classes are co-ed. Pushing limits, she believes, leads to better health. End of story.
Still, some critics see the whole scheduling thing, the repeat until pass, as a way to trap students in the toughest classes.
Yeah, the criticism is that it gives coaches dictatorial control over students' time and fitness journey.
Now, to manage some of the gender dynamics, they have these partnerships, PMPs, platonic motivational partnerships. 2 female students training 1 male student.
Why that setup?
Multiple reasons cited.
Yeah.
Female safety concerns when alone with a male student. Navigating those robo-state rules about male compulsion by having female coaches trainers. And preventing romantic entanglements, since intersexual relationships are apparently banned within the institutions.
So it's about order, motivation, and preventing exploitation within their rules.
Seems to be the rationale. It's a very structured solution.
And beyond classes, there are daily goals everyone has to hit. 3 main ones. 1 2820, maintaining a high heart rate zone for 20 minutes, 10 1010, 10 shorter bursts, and 20,000 steps.
20,000 steps, that's a lot. What happens if you don't meet them?
You get an activity deficit, and the female PMP trainers can then charge you. Sweat drops basically require you to work out with them to make it up.
Can you refuse?
You can challenge it, apparently, but there's a system where points get docked based on performance averages for both the student and the trainers, so everyone's incentivized to participate and perform.
Keeps everyone honest, I guess. And that boot camp class is described as intense.
90 minutes, military calisthenics,
Yeah.
minimal rest. Yeah, sounds like a serious grind.
And Brianna doesn't accept excuses about not being an athlete.
Not at all. Her speech apparently goes something like, "That's the problem. You are my athletes now. Your days of choosing are over. No backtalk."
Emily's perspective really brings this to life, feeling targeted, punished for being out of shape.
Yeah, finding the workouts incredibly hard, feeling like her body wasn't her own, just being in a daze.
And these assistant coaches, Samantha and Chloe, they buy into this.
They seem to. They lead by example, push everyone, and apparently enjoy the intensity themselves. They like exercises like burpees because they show determination.
And they see the uniform as discipline, too.
Yeah.
Stripping away excuses.
That's their take, yeah. It's all part of the system.
But Emily eventually adapted, came to accept it.
Initially wanted out, but yeah.
Yeah.
Learned to just follow orders, ignore the yelling style, found the endorphin rush, the mental clarity afterwards, got to the point where she felt off without it.
That's quite a turnaround. Now, that HEXFIT assessment, again, the scoring is pretty specific. Hex numbers.
Right. 7 reps in 19 seconds gets you points. 19 and 37, 37 and 61, 61 and 91. It uses these hexagonal numbers as benchmarks.
And it's all or nothing for each tier.
Seems like it. If you hit 37 reps in time for dumbbell press, great points. If you hit 36, maybe 0 for that tier. High risk, high reward.
And the activity survey part, where you rank preferences.
Yeah, 127 choices between random activities. The twist is, the lowest scorers, the ones who try to avoid activity choices, often get sent straight to Brianna's boot camp.
She sees it as clever, identifying the ones who need the push.
That seems to be her view, yeah. A way to sort them efficiently.
Emily found even the simple HEXFIT exercises hard. Jogging in place, planks.
pressure the clock, hitting the reps.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she also had that moment where other girls joined in jogging, did the IMAM thing spontaneously.
A little bit of camaraderie amidst the chaos.
Exactly. We also hear Brianna challenged another coach, Zainab, to teach an early morning BrickFit class. Shows some variety, maybe.
Okay. And just for context, body fat percentages. Athlete range for women is roughly what?
Generally cited as 14–20%. Essential fat is lower, average is higher.
So expecting students to be under 18% after 4 years of boot camp, is that realistic?
It's ambitious. Depends hugely on diet, stress, genetics. High compliance might get some there, but 18% is quite lean. Need to be careful about essential fat levels, too.
And that fitness attitude survey helps place students based on their preferences.
Yeah, 20 questions, paired choices like gym with friends versus solo walk. Emily probably leaned towards less active choices based on her description.
Got it. And the scale of this Ohio State's incoming class in 2034?
Projected around 10,500, and the gender split is stark, about 1/7 male, 6/7 female.
Wow. Okay. They even have themed workouts. Industrial Revolution.
Coal shoveling, loom crank, riveter's reach, exercises mimicking old jobs. Another creative twist.
And there are lists of coaches for other Big Ten schools, too. Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska.
Yeah, the sources provide examples suggesting this sweaty model might be spreading.
Brianna's first speech to her boot camp
Mm-hmm.
sounds like she lays down the law immediately.
Oh, yeah. Basically, you're here because you scored low and hate exercise. So discipline. No slacking, no back talk. Respect me. Repeat till I say so. I'm in charge. Pretty clear.
And the HexFit floor layout, jumping jack, lands on tiles, 10, 16, then 1.
That seems right. Center tile is 1, then spiraling out. 10 and 16 are opposite each other in the second ring.
Her 90-minute boot camp plan,
Right.
very structured, high BPM.
Maintain 106 plus BPM for an hour, 128 BPM music, 64 rep blocks. Warm up, cardio, agility, lower body, upper body, core. Continuous movement, minimal rest. It's a formula.
Emily's first actual class sounds terrifying. Immediate intensity, Brianna yelling commands.
Burpees, mountain climbers, lateral hops.
Yeah.
Yeah, direct, demanding coaching from the second it starts.
And Brianna shoots down the whole, I'm an adult, I can choose not to exercise argument.
Forcefully. Says neglecting health isn't an adult choice. Sweaty takes priority, even over studies if necessary.
What about Amanda, the journalism student who questioned the relevance?
She didn't like the time commitment, the yelling, the uniform, saw it as unrelated to her career.
Brianna's response.
Sharp. Linked physical health to professional respect. Basically said health comes first, academics second in this context.
And then the 50 push-ups incident. Just order the whole class down.
Out of nowhere, yeah, to demonstrate authority. Threatened 5 extra classes for refusal. Most complied. Even the other coaches, Fatima and Famiko, joined in.
And she focused on Amanda's form.
Watched her closely, yeah. Then delivered the message. Respect coaches, follow orders. Reminded them they still owed her the rest of the 90 minutes.
Amanda's reaction. Oh, what next?
Exhausted, barely audible. Brianna immediately corrected her attitude, I ma'am, yes ma'am, no ma'am rule, then took her to the weight room.
Just like that.
Just like that. Later, back in the studio, Brianna acknowledged the classes are overwhelming, but seemed amused by the sweaty Ohio State student logo on the uniform.
Saw it as a reminder of her control. Kind of satisfying for her.
That's the impression given, yeah. A functional uniform, but also a symbol.
So this whole system, the dynamic scheduling, the repeat until pass,
Yeah.
it's a deliberate strategy.
To overwhelm the students who need it most, based on data, coaches can trade students. The repeat rule gives them long-term control.
And the weekly requirements pile up if you fail.
2 classes needed per week, 22 per quarter. Boot campers fail initially, end up doing it daily. Fail to pass every 2 weeks, penalties accrue. Sweaty might have to take priority over academics.
Plus homework workouts.
Yeah. It's designed to be intense, force adaptation. The goal is they eventually get fit and stay fit.
And the whole sweaty concept originated with Brianna, inspired by Penn State.
Inspired by ESACT, yeah. She expanded it to the payoff debt with sweat model, collaborated with Jobs CoderWorks for HexFit and Sweat Drops.
And sweat drops are for loans and spending money, with a daily earning target.
That's the system, ties daily activity directly to financial progress.
Amanda starts to see the implications, worried about her academics.
Yeah, but Brianna's response is firm. You're an athlete now. You pass when you have an athletic build. End of discussion.
We have coach lists for Nebraska, too. Shows the reach.
And that promo message about coaches. This student will extremely actively train you.
Sounds intense. Relentless pressure, strict enforcement, lots of yelling.
Basically, get used to it. The classes are incredibly hard. You won't keep up at first, but you'll transform thanks to the coaches.
And the Hexawood scoring breakdown again. The points scale up fast.
7 reps equals 1 point each. 19 reps equals 4 points each. 37 reps equals 9 points each. 61 reps equals 16 points each. Huge potential, like 333 points for 37 reps, but 0 if you miss the time cutoff for a tier.
Amanda Steinberg's take sounds pretty sarcastic.
Very. Describes the shock, the relentless pace, despair. Brianna's warnings about slacking, complaining, needing gratitude, the mandatory "I, ma'am."
Even she admits.
Grudgingly acknowledges becoming stronger, gaining self-respect.
And Emily on push-ups.
Dreaded them. Brianna wouldn't let her quit. Ended up with stronger arms. Simple as that.
So wrapping this up, Sweaty is definitely a unique approach.
Yeah.
Intense, addresses debt and fitness together.
Yeah, it's a complex system. This deep dive really helped unpack the different parts, the methods, the personalities, the sheer demands.
You get a quick understanding, but also some surprising details.
It definitely leaves you thinking, though, about the ethics, the effectiveness. How far should universities go?
Right. Is mandating this level of physical control acceptable, even for debt relief? Could this model work elsewhere? What are the long-term impacts?
These are big questions. Tying physical activity so directly to finance, the level of institutional control, it's a lot to consider about the future of higher ed and student challenges. Definitely food for thought. All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely.
Awesome. Today we're diving into BritFit, this health and fitness program in Britain that's been, well, let's just say it's causing quite a stir.
Yeah, I've heard some things.
We've got a bunch of sources for this one, a YouTube video transcript, some promotional materials for BritFit itself, and then some stuff about this thing called House Food Court, which seems to be like a major part of the whole BritFit thing.
Interesting. So are we trying to figure out if this BritFit program can actually change a whole nation's health?
That's the big question. But first, maybe we should start with how this whole thing even got started.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so from what I gathered, this whole BritFit thing was started by a head nurse practitioner named Zab Masters. And she talks about it in this YouTube video, Fat Pigs Part 1.
Fat pigs. Wow, that's
Yeah, it's a pretty provocative title, right?
it is.
But anyway, Zab Masters, she basically lays out this whole picture of how the NHS, the National Health Service, was getting completely overwhelmed by rising obesity rates.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Obesity puts a huge strain on healthcare systems.
Exactly. And it was starting to threaten the financial stability of the NHS. So Zab Masters, being on the front lines, she saw this firsthand, and she felt like something radical needed to be done.
So BritFit was her solution, this whole point system for healthy choices and stuff.
Yep, that's BritFit in a nutshell. They call the digital currency Brit Points. And you can earn them for things like going to fitness classes, making healthy food choices, basically anything that contributes to your overall well-being.
Huh. So they're trying to, gamify healthy living?
You could say that. It's kind of a clever way to tap into that human desire for rewards, right? We all love getting points and feeling like we're achieving something.
Yeah, I guess so. But does it really work? I mean, does this kind of extrinsic motivation actually lead to lasting change? Or do people just go back to their old habits once the novelty wears off?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we're going to try to figure out as we go through all these sources.
All right, I'm ready to dive in. What else do we know about how this BritFit thing works in practice?
So they've set up these BritFit centers, get this, at every single NHS hospital.
Wow, every hospital.
Yeah, and each center offers 16 different fitness classes every day. And to make it even easier to track your progress and earn those Brit points, everyone gets a free BritFit tracker.
That's pretty impressive. It sounds like they're really trying to make it accessible for everyone.
They are, and they're not just sticking to boring old gym routines either. They've got all these crazy themed workouts like Sabbath, Sweaty Sabbath.
Sabbath, Sweaty Sabbath. What in the world is that?
It's a heavy metal workout. They blast heavy metal music and have people doing all these exercises that I guess are supposed to be head banging inspired or something.
You're kidding.
Nope, it's a real thing. And then there's Buccaneer Boot Camp, which is a pirate themed workout.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Right. They're really going all out with the creativity to make fitness fun and appealing to all kinds of people.
I guess that makes sense. If you want to get people excited about exercise, you got to make it more than just, lifting weights and running on a treadmill.
Exactly. But of course, the big question is whether this initial enthusiasm can translate into sustained engagement. Like, will people stick with it long term?
That's what I'm wondering, too. It all sounds good on paper, but, real life is a different story.
True with that. But speaking of real life, let's move on to another major part of BritFit, the house food court.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about that. So this is where you actually spend those Brit points you've earned, right?
Yep. They've got all these healthy meal options that you can basically get for free by using your Brit points.
So what kind of food are we talking about? Salads, smoothies, that sort of thing?
Well, they do have those, but they also have a lot of regional specialties like Birmingham baked chicken breast or a Brummie beetroot burger. They've even got Birmingham spiced lamb curry.
Wow, that actually sounds pretty good. But I'm guessing the less healthy options cost more Brit points.
You got it. Like, if you want the Birmingham classic fish and chips, it'll set you back a lot more Brit points than the big chicken breast.
So they're using the point system to nudge people towards healthier choices.
Exactly. It's like behavioral economics in action. By manipulating the perceived cost, they're trying to steer people towards the healthier options.
I see. It's kind of sneaky, but I guess it could be effective.
It could be, but it also raises some ethical questions, right? Like, some people might argue that it's a form of manipulation, especially if people feel pressured to choose the cheaper meal, even if it's not what they really want. What do you think?
That's a good point. It's a tricky balance, isn't it? On one hand, they're trying to help people make better choices for their health. But on the other hand, there's the risk of coming across as paternalistic or controlling.
Exactly. It's a debate that we're going to have to unpack as we go deeper into this.
Agreed. So what else have we got in our sources? Any personal stories about how this BritFit thing is actually affecting people?
Actually, yeah, there are a couple of really interesting testimonials. One person talks about how BritFit completely transformed their life. They lost a bunch of weight, they have way more energy, and they actually enjoy eating healthy now thanks to the house food court.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It sounds like it really clicked for that person.
It did. And then there's another testimonial from someone who used to struggle with overeating during the holidays. But thanks to BritFit, they were able to approach the holidays in a more mindful way and avoid the usual guilt and weight gain.
That's interesting. It sounds like BritFit helped them develop healthier habits that they can actually stick to, even during those tempting times.
Right. But of course, these are just individual stories, and we can't assume that everyone will have the same experience.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But they do give us a glimpse into the potential impact of this program on a personal level.
Definitely. And speaking of impact, there's one more aspect of BritFit that's causing quite a buzz, the house food cred card.
Oh, yeah, I read something about that. So instead of being billed for the cost of your groceries, you get billed based on how healthy they are.
Yep, that's the idea. The more Brit points you earn by choosing healthy foods, the lower your bill will be. It's a pretty radical concept.
It is. And I bet it's got some people pretty riled up.
You bet it does. And that brings us to the Fat Pigs, a group that's vehemently opposed to BritFit and this new credit card system. They see it as a form of punishment for their lifestyle choices, and they're not afraid to voice their concerns.
Yeah, I can see how they'd feel that way. It's like, are you being rewarded for being healthy or punished for not being healthy? It's a fine line, isn't it?
It is, and it raises a lot of questions about individual freedom versus the collective good. Like, how far should a government go in trying to influence people's health choices?
That's the big ethical dilemma at the heart of this whole thing, isn't it? And it's not just a British problem. It's something we're grappling with all over the world.
Absolutely. So, as we delve deeper into BritFit, we're going to have to keep these ethical considerations in mind, because it's not just about whether the program works, it's about whether it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. It's about finding solutions that are both effective and ethical. That's the real challenge.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But let's take a little break and come back to this, because there's a lot more to unpack.
Sounds good to me. You know, it's interesting how much attention this Fat Pigs group is getting.
Yeah, they're definitely making their voices heard.
It makes you wonder, though, how many other people share their concerns but aren't as outspoken.
You know what I mean. Like, maybe there's a whole silent majority out there who are uncomfortable with this whole BritFit thing but are afraid to speak up.
It's definitely possible. I mean, who wants to be labeled a fat pig?
Right. It's a pretty loaded term.
It is. And it kind of highlights the stigma and shame that's often associated with weight and health issues.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we need to be really sensitive to as we discuss this program.
Agreed. It's not about judging people or making them feel bad. It's about trying to understand the complexities of the issue and find solutions that work for everyone.
I think one of the biggest concerns that the fat pigs have raised is this whole house food credit card thing.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be worried about that.
I mean, imagine getting a credit card bill that's based on how healthy your groceries are. It's kind of like being punished for your food choices.
It is, and it raises some really tough questions about, like, who gets to decide what's healthy and what's not?
Yeah.
And what about people who can't afford to buy all those expensive organic foods?
Exactly. It seems like this system could really disadvantage lower income folks who might not have the same access to healthy options.
Right. And it's not just about the financial aspect either. There's also the psychological impact of being told what to eat.
I know, right? Like, I'm all for encouraging healthy choices, but I don't want to feel like the government is dictating my diet.
It feels kind of intrusive, doesn't it? Like a violation of personal freedom.
It does. And I think that's where a lot of the resistance to BritFit is coming from. People just don't like feeling like they're being controlled.
I get it. But at the same time, we can't ignore the very real health crisis that's happening. Obesity rates are skyrocketing, and it's putting a huge strain on healthcare systems around the world.
You're right, it's a tough situation. We need to find a way to balance individual freedom with the need to promote public health.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure, but it's a conversation that we need to have.
Absolutely. And it sounds like there are some efforts being made to actually engage with the fat pigs and listen to their concerns,
Yeah, the sources mentioned that BritFit organizers are trying to reach out to them and have a dialogue.
which I think is a really good sign.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction.
Because at the end of the day, if we want to find solutions that work for everyone, we need to be willing to listen to all sides of the story.
Absolutely. Even the voices that might make us uncomfortable.
Exactly. And you know, one of the sources mentions this really interesting story about a single mother from Birmingham.
Oh yeah, what about her?
So she was initially really skeptical of BritFit. In fact, she was almost ready to join the Fat Pigs protests.
Wow, really? So what changed her mind?
Well, she was struggling financially, and she was really worried about how she was going to pay for this house food cred card.
I can relate to that. It sounds like a lot of added expense.
It does. But for some reason, she decided to give BritFit a try.
I wonder what made her take that leap of faith.
I don't know, maybe she was just desperate for a change. But whatever the reason, it ended up being a really positive experience for her.
How so?
Well, not only did she manage to pay off her food cred card bill, but she also lost weight, got healthier, and actually started enjoying cooking healthy meals.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like BritFit really empowered her to take control of her health.
It did. And it wasn't just about her either. Her daughter also started making healthier choices, so it had a ripple effect on the whole family.
That's really cool. It's like a chain reaction of positive change.
Exactly. But it also brings up another important point. We can't just focus on individual change. We also need to address the systemic factors that make it hard for people to be healthy in the first place.
You're right, like access to affordable, healthy food, safe places to exercise, and education about nutrition and well-being.
All of those things play a huge role.
They do. And if we don't address those underlying issues, then programs like BritFit are just putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
So true. It's going to be a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. Individual change is important, but it needs to be supported by systemic change.
Now, speaking of systemic change, have you heard about how BritFit is impacting tourism?
Oh yeah, that's kind of a wild side effect, isn't it?
It is. So they're offering these free transport incentives for people to visit historical landmarks and do fitness activities there.
Really? So, like, you can go on a guided hike through the Roman ruins while earning Brit points.
Pretty much. They've got all sorts of themed events, like Conquest Weekend at BritFit Hastings, where you can do a Norman-themed workout and learn about the Battle of Hastings.
Wow, that's actually really clever. It combines fitness with education and cultural exploration.
It does. And it's a great way to encourage people to get active and learn about their history at the same time.
Plus, it's a boost for the tourism industry.
Exactly. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
Well, almost everyone. I'm sure the fat pigs aren't too thrilled about it.
Probably not. But hey, maybe if they give it a try, they'll discover a newfound love for medieval battle reenactments.
You never know.
But in all seriousness, it's fascinating to see how this program is having these unintended consequences that go way beyond just health and fitness.
It is. It's like a social experiment on a massive scale. And it's definitely shaking things up.
It is, and it's raising a lot of important questions about how we approach public health, personal freedom, and the role of government in our lives.
Big questions indeed. And I don't think we're going to have all the answers anytime soon.
Probably not. But that's what makes this so interesting, right? It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Exactly. And it's something that we need to keep thinking about and debating as we move forward. It feels like we've really gone deep on this one. Lots to think about with BritFit, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a program with like a lot of layers, right? I mean, we've seen some really positive potential, but also a whole lot of concerns and anxieties around it. So how do we even begin to sort through all that?
Well, I think the key question, the one that keeps coming back to me, is about sustainability. Like, let's say BritFit does manage to get people making healthier choices in the short term, through the points and the rewards and all that. But what happens when those incentives go away? Do those healthy habits stick around, or do people just kind of go back to their old ways?
That's what I'm wondering too. It's the difference between extrinsic motivation, like getting those Brit points, versus intrinsic motivation, where you actually want to be healthy for its own sake, you know?
Exactly. And unfortunately, the sources we have don't really give us a clear answer on that. But there are a few hints, I think, that suggest BritFit might be doing something more than just bribing people to be healthy.
Like what?
Well, remember that testimonial we talked about, the one where the person was able to break free from that cycle of holiday overeating?
Oh, yeah, that one was really interesting.
I think that story shows that BritFit can potentially help people develop new coping mechanisms and habits that last even when the immediate reward, like the Brit points, isn't there anymore.
That's a good point. It's like maybe BritFit gives people a kind of structure or support that helps them make those changes stick.
Right. But on the other hand, we can't forget about those potential downsides we discussed earlier. Like, what about the people who just can't seem to adapt to this program? What happens to them?
Yeah, that's a big concern. Could this focus on points and rewards actually create more pressure and judgment, especially for folks who are already struggling with their health or body image?
It's definitely a risk. And I think it highlights the need for BritFit's creators to be really careful and thoughtful about how they implement and monitor this program. They can't just focus on the numbers like how many points people are earning or how much weight they're losing. They need to pay attention to the psychological impact as well. Make sure they're not doing more harm than good.
Absolutely. It's about the whole picture, not just the physical health stuff.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of, fairness and equality. Like we were saying before, if healthy food is more expensive, does BritFit end up favoring people who already have more resources? Does it widen the gap between those who can afford to participate fully and those who can't?
That's a huge question. And to be honest, the sources we have don't really delve into that aspect as much as I'd like.
Yeah, it's something we definitely need more information on. Because if BritFit is going to be truly successful, it needs to be accessible to everyone, not just a select few.
So where does that leave us? I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here, but it feels like there are still so many unanswered questions about BritFit.
There are, but I think that's part of what makes this topic so fascinating, right? It's not a simple black and white issue. There are shades of gray, trade-offs to consider, unintended consequences to think about.
I agree. And I think that's the case with most big social programs, you know? There's always going to be a mix of positive and negative outcomes, intended and unintended consequences.
Right. And I think BritFit is a really good example of that. It's got this huge potential to improve people's lives, but it also has the potential to create new problems or exacerbate existing ones.
So what's the takeaway here? I mean, can we say definitively whether BritFit is a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think so. Not with the information we have right now. But what I can say is that BritFit has definitely started some really important conversations. It's got people thinking about their health, about their choices, about the role of government in their lives. And those are conversations that need to happen.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It's not about finding the right answer. It's about asking the right questions.
Exactly. And BritFit has definitely given us a lot to chew on, a lot of things to consider as we move forward in this ongoing conversation about health and well-being.
Well said. Well, folks, that's about all the time we have for today. But as always, we encourage you to keep digging into this topic, keep asking those tough questions, and keep searching for solutions that work for everyone.
And don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions and biases along the way.
You got it. Thanks for joining us on another deep dive. We'll catch you next time. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your source materials and, well, pull out the key knowledge you need, making it quick and hopefully quite engaging.
That's the goal.
So today we're jumping into something pretty fascinating, maybe a bit unsettling too, happening over in Britain. It's the rise of this thing called BritFit, and alongside it, the food cred system.
Right.
Our listener wants a solid, fast understanding of what this is all about. So our job is to give you those core insights, those aha moments, but without drowning you in detail.
And I'm here to help unpack it, add a bit of context. Ready when you are.
Okay, great. So let's start at the beginning. The sources we have paint a picture of, well, a real crisis.
Yeah, sounds quite dramatic.
Her Majesty's Healing Service, that's the NHS, essentially was apparently facing financial ruin.
And the main culprit.
Mostly preventable lifestyle-related stuff, especially obesity, it seems.
Oh, okay.
We're getting these accounts from people like Zeb Masters, a head nurse in Birmingham, and another one in Bristol. They sound, frankly, exasperated.
You can imagine. On the front line, seeing it day in, day out.
Exactly. They saw this national institution just buckling under the strain. It wasn't just about money. It was threatening the whole service, its very existence.
And it sounds like it was systemic, right? Not just a few isolated cases, but a widespread issue putting unsustainable pressure on everything.
That's the impression. This feeling that things just couldn't go on, that seems to be the spark for these, well, pretty radical changes.
Which brings us to BritFit.
Yes. Zab Masters' big idea, her eureka moment, as the sources put it.
So what is BritFit fundamentally?
It's essentially a digital currency reward system. The whole point is to nudge people, incentivize them towards healthier living.
How does that work in practice?
You earn Brit points. Pretty simple concept, really. You go to fitness classes, you do physical activity.
How do they track that?
They give everyone a free tracking device.
Yeah.
And you might even get points for, say, choosing healthier food options.
Interesting. And this wasn't just a small pilot program.
Oh, no, full national rollout. BritFit centers set up in all hospitals, 16 classes a day in each one. Plus the free trackers for everyone. It's huge.
So a major shift from just telling people to be healthy to actually rewarding them for it. Using that kind of digital reward system people are familiar with now.
Totally. And it seems the government really threw its weight behind it.
And the classes themselves. Anything special about them?
Yeah, this is quite clever, actually. They're not just generic aerobics. They've themed them,
Oh.
often based on local culture.
Ooh. Like what?
Well, in Birmingham, you've got Sabbath Sweaty Sabbath.
Wait, like Black Sabbath?
Heavy metal workouts, a nod to the city's music scene,
That's different.
And then in Bristol, there's Buccaneer Boot Camp, pirate theme.
Swashbuckling fitness.
Apparently. And Glasgow has Highland Fling Fitness Frenzy, tapping into Scottish heritage.
That's actually quite smart. Makes it less clinical, more, connected to place and identity. Probably helps with uptake.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Makes it more appealing than just go do some exercise.
Definitely generates a bit more buzz.
But it's not just about earning points. It's about spending them, too.
Right, where do the points get used?
At these house food courts that have been set up inside all the hospitals as well.
Hospital food courts. Okay.
But here's the interesting bit. The menu pricing. It's all in Brit points. But healthier food costs fewer points.
So there's the direct link to diet.
Exactly. So like a Brummy baked chicken breast might be quite cheap in points. But the Birmingham classic fish and chips, much more expensive.
Even desserts.
Yeah, a Brummy bread pudding is mentioned as costing a lot of points. It directly steers you towards the healthier plate.
That's a clear application of behavioral economics, isn't it? Making the desired choice the easier or cheaper choice in this currency.
Right, within the hospital setting itself.
And did it work? What were the initial results?
Well, according to the sources, yes. Pretty significant positive changes within about 6 months.
Really? That quickly?
Apparently, people making healthier food choices, being more active, and crucially, hospital wait times started coming down.
And costs.
Signs of easing there, too. And these house food centers became more than just canteens. They turned into sort of community hubs.
That suggests it tapped into something beyond just individual health, a social element.
Seems like it. But the program didn't stop at the hospital doors.
Oh. How did it expand?
They brought in this idea of fitness tourism.
Fitness tourism, what does that involve?
BritFit basically offers free transport, incentives to get people to visit historical sites around Britain.
So travel is the exercise.
Well, you earn Brit points just for going to places like Sheffield, the Peak District, Chatsworth House, even the Sheffield Botanical Gardens. You explore, you learn some history, and you get points.
That's quite innovative, combining exercise, culture, national heritage.
Yeah. And they have themed events, too, like a conquest weekend at the Britfit Center in Hastings tied to the battle anniversary.
It broadens the appeal significantly, doesn't it? Moves beyond just getting healthy.
Definitely seems like a way to make it more engaging. Now, focusing back on the food aspect.
Right, the diet side needed more than just point pricing.
Apparently, so they introduced the food cred card.
Okay, what's that? Sounds a bit more serious.
It is, sort of. It's basically a billing system, just for the house food courts.
Billing in actual money.
Well, it's billed quarterly, and here's the key. The amount you're billed is based on the nutritional value or lack thereof of what you ate.
Whoa. So eat unhealthy food, get a bigger bill.
That's the idea. The sources mention a woman named Sophie. She got a really high bill at first.
Ouch.
But then the system kicked in as intended. She used Britfit, the classes, the activity, to earn points, which she could then use to reduce her food cred debt.
Ah, so Britfit points can offset the food cred bill. It's all interconnected.
Exactly. And her story also touches on finding a sense of community through it all, personal growth.
It illustrates the loop, doesn't it? The stick of the bill and the carrot of Britfit points to manage it.
Precisely. But as you'd expect, not everyone was thrilled about this.
No, I imagine there'd be pushback.
Yeah, the sources mention resistance, particularly a group in Birmingham who were described pretty bluntly as fat pigs.
Okay. Strong language in the source material there.
Very. But it also says Zab Masters, the nurse practitioner, tried to talk with them. Dialogue? Empathy?
Trying to bridge the gap despite the opposition.
Right. And Sophie, the woman with the bill, apparently she was tempted to join the protests at first.
Oh, interesting.
But in the end, she decided to engage with Britfit instead.
Which highlights the pull of the incentives, perhaps, for some people facing that choice.
Could be. Now, what happens if you don't engage? If you resist, rack up huge debt, skip classes.
Is there a consequence beyond the bill?
Oh, yes. A very significant one. The Tower of London.
The Tower of London. Seriously.
Turned into the sweaty labor fitness camp. That's where you end up. Massive food cred debt, repeated absences, refusal to participate. Straight to the tower.
Wow. That's quite an escalation. What's it like there?
The description is pretty stark. Wake up at 5:45 a.m., sirens, Her Majesty's voice broadcasting commands.
Her Majesty. Like the Queen.
That's what the sources imply. Synchronized bed making, strict uniforms, black and white stripes, constant surveillance.
Sounds more like a prison camp than a fitness retreat.
The daily routine sounds intense too. Calisthenics. Something called the debt burden carry.
Debt burden.
Apparently you carry sandbags marked with your calorie debt.
Good grief.
Then protein-only breakfast, fitness drills, humble labor, eating dinner alone, mandatory readings, evening march, reflection hour.
Reflection hour.
Yeah, and then early lights out. Any infractions mean penalties.
It's designed to be harsh. A serious deterrent, clearly.
Yeah.
And possibly re-educative.
Seems like it. The sources tell a story about a woman from Glasgow, Margaret McRae.
What happened to her?
She was very defiant initially. There's a quote attributed to her saying she wouldn't dance for some daft cow.
Fiery.
Built up huge food cred debt, ended up in the tower, but she apparently transformed.
How so?
She became a Britfit coach. Leads her own class now, something called Grit and Gravy Glutes Boot Camp.
From defiant inmate to boot camp leader. That's quite a turnaround.
It really leans into this idea mentioned, Britain collects and sweat. Like, you literally work off your debt.
It's a compelling narrative, whether you agree with the methods or not. It suggests the system can change people, even resistant ones.
Then there's another story, an American woman, Brianna McKee.
What was her situation?
She was apparently protesting the mandate in Birmingham and got sent to the tower.
An American citizen.
Wow. And first thing that happened, off with their hair rule.
Pardon?
Anyone with unnatural hair color gets their head shaved immediately.
That's intense. Symbolic, almost.
And we also hear about a speech from Her Majesty, justifying the tower.
What was the justification?
Framing it as essentially a repayment plan for people who took advantage of the NHS, a return to traditional British service values, correcting the decadence of the welfare state.
So, linking it to national character. Duty.
Yes, and she even contrasts the historical conscription of men with what she seems to imply is the indulgence of women under the welfare system.
That's a very specific and quite pointed gendered argument.
It is, and that connects to another phenomenon mentioned in the sources, the manishing.
The manishing, what's that?
Apparently, before this whole robo-state thing emerged, there was a noticeable drop in men's presence in public life in cities.
Really? Why?
Sources suggest men were opting out of the usual social and economic systems, getting into crypto, using AI for healthcare,
Avoiding the traditional structures.
and crucially, they weren't racking up food cred debt like women were.
So the system, Aisha's BritFit,
Right.
its focus, seemed to fall more heavily on women.
The sources argue it wasn't necessarily deliberate discrimination, but more a reflection of the data. Women were engaging more with the healthcare system, thus accruing the debt, so the interventions targeted them more.
A data-driven outcome with significant gender implications.
Exactly. Now, underpinning all of this is technology. The BritFit app.
Right, the tracker app. Is it just for points?
Oh no, it's mandatory. Tracks your activity, your Brit points, your food cred score. It even has something called a snitch board.
A snitch board. Seriously.
Seems so. And leaderboards. Lots of social pressure, gamification.
Turning health into a public competition almost.
And it gets more public. There's a food cred debtor scoreboard displayed publicly.
What does that show?
Top repairs, people with the lowest scores, sometimes with shame quotes attached.
Shame quotes. Wow.
And even lists of people who are wanted by the system, presumably for non-compliance.
That's leveraging public shaming quite aggressively as a tool for compliance. Raises all sorts of privacy questions.
Absolutely. It's all part of what seems to be Her Majesty's overall vision.
Which is?
To sculpt the nation, basically. In her image of discipline, BritFit and food cred are presented as a kind of moral operating system.
Using debt, shame, surveillance, gamified exercise.
Right. She sees Brit points as receipts of compliance. The tower is the ultimate backstop.
And if you don't have enough points to cover your food cred,
There's mention of a plan for April Fool's Day billing people the outstanding amount in actual sterling. Pounds.
another turn of the screw, keeping the pressure on.
It seems so.
Yeah.
But the sources end on a slightly different note.
Oh.
Back in Birmingham, those fat pigs protesters.
Yeah, what about them?
They're now seen joining Zainab's, presumably Zab Masters fitness class. In workout gear, looking eager to work off their food cred debt.
So even the initial resistors are coming around, or perhaps feel they have no choice.
It suggests the system, for all its extremes, might be achieving its stated goal of changing behavior, at least for some.
A powerful combination of incentives and consequences.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Summing up this deep dive,
It's quite a journey.
we've seen how BritFit and food cred evolved into this really comprehensive, sometimes quite extreme system, all aimed at tackling obesity and healthcare costs in Britain.
Yeah, with some genuinely surprising elements. The themed workouts, the food billing based on health impact.
The fitness tourism, the tower, the manishing. You should definitely now have a strong grasp of how it works, the ideas behind it, and, well, the controversies too.
What stands out is this intricate web they've built. Rewards, penalties, social pressure, technology, all pushing towards specific behaviors.
It shows how a major health crisis can trigger some really radical thinking, doesn't it? And how technology plays a huge role in both enabling and enforcing it.
Absolutely. Which really makes you think about the bigger picture.
Right.
Well, that balance between public health goals and personal freedom. Where do you draw the line?
And the role of tech in shaping our choices. How far should that go?
Plus, the potential unintended consequences. We talked about the gender aspect with the manishing. What else might emerge from a system like this?
Lots to chew on. It really leaves you wondering.
What's that?
Could you ever see something like this, maybe parts of it, being tried elsewhere? And what would the ethical minefield look like if someone did?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The data-driven push for outcomes is everywhere. But this level of intervention, it's something else. Definitely food for thought.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining me on this fascinating, if slightly chilling deep dive.
My pleasure. Always interesting to unpack these complex scenarios.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning.
That's true.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at BritFit.
Yeah.
You know that UK health initiative that was launched back in 2032?
Yeah.
We've got all sorts of interesting sources for this one. Journal entries, potential marketing materials, even some hypothetical menus.
Interesting.
So we're really going to get into the weeds on this one and try to figure out, is this thing revolutionary or what?
Well, it's certainly ambitious, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's trying to tackle a really systemic issue, the strain on the NHS
Yeah,
from all these preventable health problems.
that's right. And that's actually a great place to start.
Okay.
So we've got the HAVES, the Health and Fitness Instruction Services,
Right.
which completely replaced the NHS back in 2032.
Right.
What led to such a dramatic shift?
Well, the sources point to these nurses like Zainab Masters and Demi Barr, who were really on the front lines, seeing the impact of these preventable illnesses every single day. And they wanted to find a way to incentivize people to get healthy before they needed serious medical care.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does BritFit actually work in practice?
So it's a pretty interesting system.
Okay.
They've set up these BritFit centers all over the country, often in former NHS hospitals.
Interesting.
And they offer all these free fitness classes.
Okay.
And when you attend these classes, you earn these Brit points,
Brit points.
which is like a digital currency.
Like a crypto.
Kind of, yeah. And you can use these Brit points to get healthy meals at the on-site AG5 food courts,
Okay.
or fitness gear, or even cooking classes.
Wow. So it's like they're building this whole ecosystem around healthy choices.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. So you're earning these points, but how are they actually tracking everyone's progress?
Right. So everyone gets a free BritFit tracker,
Okay.
sort of like a Fitbit,
I was going to say, yeah.
to monitor their activity. And early reports from Demi Barr suggest it's actually having a real impact.
Okay.
Like wait times for non-emergency procedures are down 40% on average.
40%. That's huge.
Yeah, and healthcare costs have gone down significantly.
Wow. That's incredible. But I have to ask, is it all sunshine and roses?
Right.
Are there downsides to this?
Well, yeah, there are some concerns about access and affordability.
Okay.
Like what about people who can't easily get to a BritFit center,
Right.
or people who can't afford healthier food options, even with the Brit points?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like there's this risk of creating a two-tiered system
Yeah,
where healthy living becomes a privilege.
exactly. Right. And then you've got the food cred system,
Oh, yeah, food cred.
which is where things get a little more controversial.
Yeah, the credit card that bills you based on how healthy your food is.
Right.
That just sounds like a recipe for judgment and maybe even food shaming.
That's one way to look at it. It's this whole complex algorithm that calculates the cost based on the nutritional value. And it really heavily penalizes unhealthy choices. So, while some people are applauding this focus on healthier eating, others are really worried about the potential negative consequences.
Yeah, and we actually have a source
Okay.
that tells the story of this single mom, Sophie,
Yeah.
who gets hit with this massive food cred bill
Wow.
and ends up having to use BritFit to pay it off. Sounds like a pretty dramatic turning point for her.
Yeah, it really highlights how BritFit goes beyond just the physical aspect of health. It can really impact people's personal finances.
Right.
And even kind of force them to reevaluate their entire lifestyles.
Wow.
And Sophie, she was initially reluctant, but it ultimately leads her to embrace a healthier lifestyle.
It's interesting how they're using these incentives and even financial pressure to kind of nudge people towards better choices. But let's shift gears a bit here and talk about those local BritFit classes.
Okay.
We touched on them earlier, but the names are just so creative.
Yeah, they really seem to be tapping into local pride to get people engaged.
Uh-huh.
And each BritFit center offers classes that are specifically tailored to its location.
So, like, what are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Well, in Birmingham, they've got Villa Park Vibe and Balti Bounce.
Those are great. I bet the energy in those classes is electric.
I'm sure.
What about other locations?
Bromley has the Bromley Burnout,
Okay.
and Wigan has Posh and Pumped.
They really are trying to make fitness fun and relatable.
Yeah, something that people can really connect with.
Absolutely. And then there's Sweaty Labor Morning Mandate
Okay.
and the Harborside Hustle. This is brilliant. What a way to build community. And speaking of community, Demi Barr actually mentions this concept of fitness tourism in her journal.
Oh, yeah, it's like this unexpected outcome of BritFit.
Okay.
People are actually flocking from all over to attend these classes held at these iconic landmarks, like Stonehenge or Edinburgh Castle.
You can earn Brit points for working out at historical sites.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's a great way to encourage both fitness and exploration.
It is, and it's a real boon for the domestic tourism industry,
Right.
which is great for the UK economy.
Make a win-win-win situation here. We've got improved health, cultural exploration, and a boost to the economy.
Yeah, sounds pretty good on paper.
But I think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit.
Okay.
Because we still need to unpack those potential downsides
Right.
and really try to figure out, is this whole thing sustainable in the long run?
You're right. There's definitely a lot more to consider. And we'll be getting into all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
So we were just talking about fitness tourism and how BritFit encourages people to explore the UK while getting fit. But I think we need to circle back to those potential downsides.
Yeah, definitely.
We touched on earlier, one thing that really jumps out to me from the sources is this heavy reliance on technology.
Right.
I mean, everyone's got a BritFit tracker, BritPoints are digital.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of this program revolves around these online platforms.
Yeah, it does.
So what happens if the tech fails?
That's a good question.
Or what about people who don't have reliable internet access or who aren't comfortable using these digital tools?
Right.
Are they just left behind?
Yeah, that's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah.
For BritFit to really be successful, they need to make sure that everyone has equitable access to the technology.
Right.
And that they have systems in place for when things inevitably go wrong.
Yeah, these things always go wrong.
Exactly.
And what about security? I mean, just imagine if someone hacks into the system and starts manipulating BritPoints or the food cred system.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that could really undermine the whole program.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Robust security measures are going to be absolutely crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll need to stay ahead of these potential threats as technology evolves.
It seems like they're walking a bit of a tightrope here.
Yeah.
They need technology to make this whole thing work,
Uh-huh.
but they also need to address the potential pitfalls that come with it.
That's right.
But let's talk more about this food cred system. We've talked about the potential for food shaming,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about the bigger picture here. What kind of impact could this have on the food industry as a whole?
Well, that's a really interesting question. You know, on the one hand, if people are being incentivized to eat healthier foods,
Right.
that could lead to a decline in the sales of less healthy products.
Yeah.
And that could have a huge impact on businesses that rely on those sales.
Absolutely, but couldn't it also drive innovation? Maybe we'll see food companies start reformulating their products to be more BritFit friendly.
I could see that happening.
Yeah. Like we might see this whole new wave of healthier options hitting the market.
Yeah, I think BritFit could act as a catalyst for change in a way.
Okay.
You know, pushing the food industry to adapt and cater to this more health-conscious consumer base.
Uh-huh.
It could even lead to, like, collaborations between Hefeweiss and food companies
Interesting.
to develop new healthy products.
It's almost like BritFit is forcing everyone to rethink their relationship with food, from individuals to businesses to the government.
It really is.
It's a massive societal shift. And it kind of raises this big question for me.
Okay.
Is this level of intervention justified?
That's a big one.
You know, is it really the role of the government to be influencing what people eat, even if it is for the sake of public health?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a slippery slope.
It is, but, you know, the government's already involved in regulating food safety and labeling.
Right.
So you could kind of see this as an extension of that role,
I see what you mean.
just with a different focus.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
Exactly.
But it's something that we as a society definitely need to grapple with.
We do.
Because the potential benefits of BritFit are undeniable, right? I mean, we've got reduced healthcare costs, a healthier population, even a boost to tourism.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential upside.
But we can't ignore those potential downsides either.
Right.
You know, we talked about access, affordability, privacy,
Mm-hmm.
even the possibility of government overreach.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is, and it makes me wonder about the long-term sustainability of this whole program.
Yeah.
Like, can they really keep this up? Where's all the money coming from to fund this massive undertaking?
Well, the sources suggest that they're basically redirecting existing NHS resources.
Okay.
The idea is that by preventing these health problems in the first place,
Right.
they'll save money in the long run.
So it's a bit of a gamble.
It is.
But if it pays off, it could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
So it's like they're investing in preventative care now to reduce the need for these expensive treatments down the line.
Exactly.
But what about those partnerships with private businesses that we mentioned earlier?
Oh, right.
How does that fit into the funding picture?
Well, that's where things get kind of interesting.
Okay.
So these companies that offer rewards,
Right.
like, you know, fitness gear or discounts on healthy meals,
Mm-hmm.
they're essentially buying into the program.
Okay.
You know, they get to promote their products to a health-conscious audience. And BritFit gets these additional resources to keep the program running.
So it's a clever way to kind of leverage private sector support
Yeah,
for a public health initiative.
exactly.
It sounds like a win-win.
It does.
But even with government funding and private sector support, can this model really be sustained in the long run? And what about expanding it beyond the UK? Is this something that could work in other countries?
Well, that's a question we'll need to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've been really unpacking this BritFit program, its goals, its methods, even some of the potential pitfalls. But I think the big question that remains for me
Okay.
is this a sustainable model?
Right.
And could it work outside of the UK?
Yeah, those are the big ones. So let's tackle sustainability first.
Yeah.
The sources don't paint like a complete picture,
Right.
but we can kind of glean some insights from what we do have.
Okay.
And one key factor is just the sheer scale of BritFit. It's not like a little pilot program or anything.
Right.
It's woven into the fabric of HAFS.
Oh.
Yeah, it's massive. And this level of integration really suggests a long-term
That
commitment.
commitment alone isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
You need the resources to back it up.
You do.
And we've talked about redirecting those NHS funds and these private partnerships. But is that really enough to keep this thing going?
That is the million Brit point question, isn't it?
It is.
If their gamble on this preventative care pays off,
Okay.
if they really do see these significant long-term savings on treatment costs,
Yeah.
then the funding could become self-sustaining.
So it all hinges on that initial investment paying off. But what if those savings don't materialize as quickly as they hope?
Then it gets a bit trickier. You know, they might need to explore some other funding avenues.
Okay.
Maybe taxes on unhealthy foods.
Okay.
Increased private investments. Maybe even international collaborations.
It's a constant balancing act.
It is.
And speaking of international collaborations, could BritFit be exported to other countries?
Right.
We talked about how deeply rooted this program is in British culture. You know, you've got those location-specific classes, the tie-in with these iconic landmarks.
Right. It's very British. So adapting it wouldn't be as simple as just like a copy-paste job.
No.
You know, other cultures have different relationships with food, with fitness, even with government intervention.
Right. But the core principles,
Okay.
like the incentives, the community engagement, the tech integration,
Yeah.
those could be universal.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like imagine a Brazilian samba sweat class in Rio,
Oh, I love that.
or earning points for hiking the Inca Trail.
Yeah.
The possibilities are pretty fascinating.
It makes you wonder if we might see this whole, like, global network of interconnected health programs.
Wow.
You know, each with its own cultural flavor, but united by this common goal of preventative care.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing.
But let's not forget about those potential downsides.
Right.
We've talked about data privacy, the digital divide, even the ethical implications of that food cred system.
Yeah, those would definitely need to be addressed.
Mm.
Those challenges would need careful consideration in any adaptation or expansion.
So it's exciting to imagine BritFit going global.
Uh-huh.
But it's not without its hurdles.
Wow.
But even if it doesn't become this worldwide phenomenon, it's still just this incredible experiment.
Yeah.
It's a bold attempt to really reshape how we think about health and well-being.
I completely agree. At the very least, it's sparked a vital conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's pushing us to question our assumptions, explore new possibilities, and ultimately take more responsibility for our collective health.
And that, I think, is one of the most valuable takeaways from this whole deep dive.
Absolutely.
Whether or not BritFit succeeds in the long run, it's forced us to confront some pretty crucial questions about healthcare, about technology, and the power of collective action.
That's right.
And that's a conversation worth having, no matter where you are in the world. So keep asking those questions, keep exploring those possibilities, and most importantly, keep taking care of yourselves and each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into BritFit. Thanks for joining us.